Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, and thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be covering the topic Introducing Office 365 E5 with our fantastic solution architect, Chris Sheridan.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. So again, my name is Chris Sheridan. I am a team lead and lead solution architect here at New Signature. And today we're going to be walking through the Microsoft E5 suite, kind of what's new. I like to share some of the philosophical change and what's happening at Microsoft so that customers understand why some of these changes are coming and why some of these bundles are there. And then we'll walk through some of those features and functions of E5 and what's new to you and what you should be aware of. Okay. So, Lindsay, can you just confirm that we're on slide 3?
I am not seeing the slides change, actually.
Yeah, so I just need to take over. I think it still has you as presenter.
Nope, it's you as it says you're the presenter.
There we go. I'll manage the content then. I'll take over.
So while Chris is getting that set together, a couple of housekeeping items. This is being recorded and will be sent out post this event, usually sent within 48 hours. Question and answers. If you are not currently seeing the presentation, there are 2 tabs at the bottom, a presentation tab and a question and answer tab. Often it defaults to the question and answer tab, so please make sure that you switch over to presentation. And for all questions and answers, please feel free at any point to put your questions in that question and answer tab. We will get to those at the end, or if there is an appropriate time where Chris switches over, we will also look at them at that point. If you have any other questions, feel free to go ahead and post, and we will be sending again at the end. Thank you.
Excellent, and it looks like it's working now. So when we think about the changes inside of Microsoft, we think about, the marketing slogan that Satya Nadella has been touting for a couple of years now, right? That MobileFirst, CloudFirst world. And what does that mean, right? When you go through all the analytics, we all know from Gartner and Forrester, more and more people working remote, more and more people working from home. It's not where you are, it's what you're getting done. But when we take that a step further and we start thinking about that, what it really means to gain access to content and what it really means to gain access to that information. From a Microsoft standpoint, it's really that redoubling or down or that refocusing the effort on the productivity suite and understanding that's really why that's really why people embrace Microsoft, right? It's the productivity that they get and that collaboration that they get from their peers. Hand in hand with that, though, with that mobility comes with the idea that security is the enemy of mobility, right? Traditionally, we want a more locked down environment. We want it more contained because then I can control the flow of that data. I can control the access, make sure we don't have any leakage of our information. And Microsoft's really spent the past 3 years focusing on that problem. If we're going to be a mobile-first, cloud-first world, how do we tie security into that? How do we start bringing security, controls, DLP, and all of those things that we need to be mobile, we need to be cloud, into our environment so we can make use of that information? So that's really when we think about some of the advances in the Office 365 and Azure suites and what Microsoft has rolled into E5, that's really what we're going to start seeing. So we'll walk through that. So when we think about that value in Office 365, right, we talk about modern collaboration, right? It's how we are all communicating with each other, whether it's IM, voice, video, email, blogging, some way to disseminate information. When we think about how we're going to collaborate and communicate, I like to use New Signature as a prime example. New Signature has some beautiful offices. We have offices in Toronto, New York, DC, Alpharetta, Georgia. They're all lovely. I've never set foot in any of them often. I think I've been in our headquartered office twice in 3.5 years. Why? I work from home. I work remote. There's no need for me to go into an office. I can do everything I need to do remotely. But how are we collaborating and connecting with our peers in that type of environment? It's things like video. New Signature internally has a mandate. All calls are video calls. So that way we're actually seeing each other. We're actually communicating and collaborating with each other in that nonverbal way, right? 70% of communication is nonverbal, 80% if you get the actual statistic, right? So we're getting that nonverbal communication. We're getting that collaboration. So in E5, we've taken that up and allowed people to move their full voice solution into the cloud through PSTN Calling and conferencing. We'll walk through a little bit of that. We brought a lot of the personalized insights, so bringing that organizational knowledge, that team knowledge, right? It started with things like Yammer. I often meet with a lot of companies, and Yammer, which has been part of the other suites forever. A lot of people ask me, well, why Yammer? Why do you use it? Well, Yammer is that hive mind. It's that collective brain that we have. If I ask a question via email and someone on my team answers, well, we all gain the benefit from that. But what happens when we hire someone tomorrow? That institutional knowledge that was just shared isn't shared with that new person unless we remember to forward that message off to them. And that very rarely happens in today's day and age. So how do we then get that knowledge out there? It's through things like Yammer and social collaboration. Take that a step further, and we talk about analytics, and we talk about BI and bringing the power of information further down the chain to transactional-based employees so that they can make smart decisions on what to do, what to prioritize, and how to tackle things. Then you talk about things like Delve and analytics, where we're bringing that information and searching of content into a social engagement, to a social connection with our peers. I like to use the example when I talk about Delve. If I were to go into Microsoft's Infopedia, their internal SharePoint, and I were to search for Office 365 presentations, it generates about 180,000 results. If I narrow that down to English, my primary language, then I'm able to get it down to about 120,000 results. And if I narrow it down to the last 6 months, I can get it down to about 80,000 results. Well, which one of those 80,000 PowerPoints is the one I'm actually interested in, right? By bringing social analytics into the environment through Delve, we get that information. Now when you take Delve Analytics, Org Analytics into it, now we can also figure out how we're collaborating with others. How much time do I spend collaborating with my peers? How much time do I spend in meetings every week? There's this concept of focus time. Focus time is 2-hour blocks on your calendar where you're actually free to get work done. Because we know if we're going from meeting to meeting with half-an-hour gaps in between, those half-an-hour gaps really aren't useful because we're really not getting anything done in that half-an-hour gap. We don't have time to sit down and get real work done. So it analyzes your time and how you're collaborating and, all of that information so we can know how we're connecting to each other. And then when we think about that people-centric compliance, this has been a theme inside of Microsoft for quite a while with System Center, Intune, and some of the various pieces where we talk about that, the computer is irrelevant. The device you're actually logged into is completely irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. Yes, I can BitLocker the hard drive to keep the data on the hard drive encrypted. That's wonderful. But if I'm logged into the machine, it's decrypted. I have access to it. I've authenticated. I'm logged in. So we can still get slippage and leakage from that if I accidentally put something somewhere it doesn't belong. So when we start thinking about bringing that security and control on a personal level, encrypting what you're doing, encrypting the data. You can access the payroll file because you have rights while it's on the SharePoint environment. But the minute you download it locally, which, hey, you're the CFO, you have permissions to do, I need to encrypt that data. Or I need to do legal searches and holds, not just across SharePoint, but across SharePoint, across Exchange, across Skype for Business messages. I need to look for content regardless of its location. I need to protect people from themselves. I'll tell some stories when we get into that will hopefully make you laugh and cringe as we go through it. But these are really that values that we're looking at and we're adding into E5. So again, when we think about security, right, we're adding advanced threat protection. Right, advanced threat protection is zero-day threat malware protection, real-time click. It takes that email, that link, loads it in a VM to make sure that website isn't trying to do anything bad or that piece of content isn't trying to do anything bad. Because a lot of the really good malware in today's day and age isn't actually malicious code, because that can be sniffed out and stopped. The advanced way that a lot of people are doing it now is utilizing legitimate tools to do bad things. So making sure and checking for those types of activities before things are loaded. Giving customers control over their data through customer lockbox. Bring your own key. You have the decryption key. You're the only one who can decrypt your data. It's an extra layer of paranoia that we can put on top of Office 365, even though Microsoft in the other versions has all sorts of protocols and control and still needs your permission to access your data. In this case, Microsoft can't even do it without your action, without your intervention. Through advanced e-discovery, right, being able to do that quick search and being able to do predictive information on it. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about Power BI Pro and bringing it on-prem. We'll talk about Delve Analytics. And then we'll talk a lot about voice and what voice in the cloud looks like. So when we think about that people-centric compliance, right, again, that customer lockbox, bring your own data, customer approval. When we think about that workflow of accessing Microsoft helping you with your tenant, you call Microsoft, ask them for help. Microsoft initiates a request that goes to whoever you've designated as your administrators to gain access to that information. You grant it. It is JIT and JIA, if you're not familiar with those terms, just in time accessed and just enough access, where it is timed, where Microsoft can only access your data for a certain allotment of time while they're helping you, and then when they're done helping you, it automatically times out. And in fact, if you're ever on a long support call with Microsoft, you'll notice at some point they initiate a new request because they know they're about to lose access. And so they need to initiate a new request because they can't automatically renew it. You have to renew it. The advanced threat protection is an interesting one. This is a concept that's been around. There are other products that have been out there. Microsoft made a really great acquisition and baked this into Office 365 with real-time click protections. I use the example of a hospital I was dealing with in New England that they got hit by a phishing attack, and 3 executives clicked on an email that came in and were hit by that attack. So they decided to do a test after they cleaned it up and sent an email that was a very obvious phishing attack that they sent it to all 75 senior executives. 72 out of the 75 executives clicked on it. And I'll have you note that the 3 who didn't were not the 3 who got hit with it before. They all clicked on it again. The next day I was in there helping them put in advanced threat protection, right? Protecting their environment, protecting from phishing attacks and protecting from these zero-day attacks. There's a slight downside to it in that if you've ever dealt with these tools in the past, they all have one common characteristic. Because it's doing real-time click protection, it has a little bit of a delay when you click on a link from an email, when you go to open an attachment from an email, or when the attachment is sent to you, rather, in an email, where it is scanning it. So there's a little bit of a delay in the receipt of these emails, which email is not a real-time tool anyway and should not be treated as such, but we all know a lot of users do. So that's an issue that we have to deal with, and it's more just a user education problem that we run into. And then when we think about that predictive e-discovery, we've had e-discovery for a while in Office 365, able to search across multiple workloads, but now what we're adding is a predictive nature to it and some machine learning to it, so that if, let's say, there's an email that contains content that we're searching for, and there's 7 replies to that message, but they're all Me Too emails. Yep, I agree. Yeah, that's great. There's no actual new content added to them. Microsoft has added machine learning now where it will consolidate those 12 messages into a single message stream saying, yep, here's this message. There's 12 other messages related to it, but we have discovered no new information. So when you think about a paralegal or a lawyer who has to be going through, or someone in HR going through this amount of data, they did a search for a term and it returned 1,000 results. Wouldn't it be great if we could reduce that to maybe 100 results, because a lot of that data is redundant. And if you talk to anybody who's done these types of searches, there is a lot of that. There's a lot of that dissecting through it to figure out what's irrelevant, what's redundant. And so Microsoft started baking that in. So it will simplify that identification of messages to make it easier for people to go through that data. So again, when we think about those different people in our organization, right, legal and security, we're helping them feel better about compliance. We're helping with that advanced e-discovery. We're making sure no sensitive data is going out. We're making sure that the environment is protected. And then when we think about things like SOX compliance and all the other, FISMA, FERPA, HIPAA, and all the other wonderful things we want to do, that's where things like Lockbox and advanced e-discovery can really come in and help a finance department pass their audit and help the IT department pass their audit and saying, nope, see, we're doing all of these checks, we've got these controls. Because the logical security in Office 365 is still your problem, but Microsoft is taking care of the physical security, and this is sort of that branch in between where you guys can both feel good about your controls on the environment. Okay, then when we think about sorry, this is just redundant. We'll send out these slides. Again, it's going through all the various features and functions in case you need to present it up. So now when we think about personal insights, personal information, the more data we have as an organization and the quicker we can get it into people's hands, the quicker decisions they can make on their behavior and the quicker decisions they can make on better decisions they can make on behalf of the company. So we really want to be able to bring multiple data streams together and present them to people in a way that makes sense to them, and be able to mash up this data. One dashboard for all of your data. I don't care if it's in SQL, I don't care if it's in Oracle, I don't care if it's in an Excel spreadsheet, if it's in CRM, if it's in Salesforce. Microsoft is actually connecting this to all sorts of SaaS-based services now. You can even pull things from, say, your Azure tenant or your Office 365 tenant from an IT standpoint to mash up data with health and performance and different things from an IT standpoint, all the way down through, on my team, we track how many activities you've logged in our different systems. We have, because we're a couple of companies who have come together from a merger and acquisition standpoint, we're narrowing down to a single time entry system. But for a while, we had 3 different time entry systems for the legacy companies as we came together. We had a Power BI dashboard that melded those time entry systems together so that we could get accurate time entry reports from 3 different systems before we consolidated. We were able to spin up that dashboard within a matter of hours so that we were able to get that data, and as a manager, you can look and see across different teams or different systems what's going on. So really bringing that information together to give people insights into what's going on. And again, that analytics, I have a lot of fun when I do presentations with my sales reps up here in the New England area, where it's always a drum roll when I'm doing a demo of it for a customer. And I'm like, oh, how long was my response time to you last week? And I can see, well, gee, Brad, my average response time to you last week was 2 hours, or it was 20 hours, or it was 30 hours. Wow, I was really slow to respond last week. I'm sorry. What can I do to step that up? It took me a day and a half, or had a couple of big meetings. That's why. But just having that insight, having that ability to, at the end of the week, look back and reflect and go, wow, I really didn't spend much time with Brad, who I support, or I haven't talked to Gennady on our team in 3 weeks. Let me reach out to him and see how he's doing. Things like that, getting that insight into what's going on within your team and your organization. And then Planner is tied with Office 365 groups. If you're not familiar with those, they're kind of a hybrid of public folder, OneDrive, OneNote notebook, kind of all mashed together in an Exchange group. And you have the ability to use Planner. Think of it like Project Light. It's not going to give me my full NAT charts. It's not a full-blown project, but for a lot of things, maybe we don't need that. I just have a team, and I need to make sure, hey, everybody, let me know what your vacation time is, what days you're taking off over the holidays, or, hey, everybody's got to look at this new HR document, so I'm going to go out and assign that task to everybody on the team, and we can all see when things are done and where they're at, so that we can kind of hold each other accountable for it. So again, doing some of those workflows and doing some of those tasks when we don't need full-blown project, but we just need to manage tasks across the team. So again, bringing that data and insight as to what's going on with our team, what's going on within our company, bringing it to people's hands so they get access to it quickly. Within E5, we also have an offline full desktop app, Power BI Pro, which you can do a lot of this data offline, not just in the browser, and you can get access to a lot of this information from a full GUI app if you want to. So again, bringing that information, bringing that data to people within a SharePoint site, within a team site, exposing that data so that they don't even have to know Power BI. They can simply go to their team site and get that information quickly. It doesn't have to be just going to Power BI. We can build that report in Power BI and then publish it out into various places and areas. So again, we talked about that Power BI Pro, which is the full offline access, and Delve Analytics. So then when we think about collaboration, so now we've got this, we're secure. We've locked down the environment, we're certain we're secure. We've got some good information to make decisions, but now how do we communicate with each other, right? And we talked about Yammer earlier on, and we're hopefully most of you, given that we're doing our broadcast through it today from Skype for Business and how that works. Now we're adding that full meeting broadcast and that full PSTN integration into the cloud. This launched back in November of last year and slowly has been growing with what countries are available and what services are available. So when we think about a typical Skype for Business meeting, theoretically you want between 100 to 200 participants max in a typical Skype for Business call, right? Beyond that, the resources start to get constrained on the server, and that call might suffer some quality issues. Well, sometimes companies need a larger broadcast, either out to customers or internal, and that's where Skype for Meeting Broadcast comes in, where you can reach up to 10,000 people in a single large meeting. It's using Azure services on the back end through a browser for people to access it from anywhere, and because it's caching the video as it's going on, people can pause it, get up, walk away, come back, continue on watching it. In case you're hitting people in different time zones or people need to, take a break for some reason, they can pause and catch up. Of course, watching it real time, you can integrate it with things like Yammer, where you can have real-time feedback coming from people in a Yammer feed that's connected to it for people to be able to collaborate and ask questions real-time if you want to do it. Or if you want to keep it just a broadcast, video and voice-based and presentation-based, you can do that as well. So then we also add PSTN Calling, and so Microsoft has partnered with a whole bunch of carriers and brought different SIP trunks into their data centers so that they can now offer PSTN Calling from their data centers. Started in the U.S. and has branched out slowly. I actually had to pull out, I had a slide in here that had what countries are in, and I realized it was a few months out of date, and I didn't have time to go grab the new one. But if you go to the Office 365 blog, you can pull up exactly what countries have recently launched, which ones are in the roadmap upcoming, and where it is already, so that you can see where you can do that PSTN calling, where you can get dial-in numbers, so that you can use it just like you would on-prem. You also have the ability to do it in a hybrid model, where if you wanted to still use your on-premise SIP trunk, you can do so and do a hybridized deployment where you have Skype for Business on-premise servers that are connected to your SIP trunk. That is where your voice is routing out from even though the users are hosted in Office 365. So it's simply a question of cost and how you want to do it and how you want to connect it. But understand that PBX system can now transition fully to the cloud, partially to the cloud. You can do all sorts of different options here for how you want to utilize your voice moving forward. But as companies are looking more and more to get out of the data center business and get into just using these applications, right, this was a natural evolution of doing voice in the cloud. So when we think about that, how this really comes into play, again, using that people-centric mindset, marketing and human resources, being able to do conferences or interviews, doing full-out all-company broadcasts, right? Taking some of that redundancy that you might have to worry about with your PBX on-premise and moving that to the cloud so that now you can access it anywhere, anytime, regardless of location. As long as you have an internet connection, you have access to your voice. And Office 365 offering that redundancy that maybe a lot of customers can't afford to do on-prem or are struggling to do on-prem, right? Multiple data center, multiple instances in each data center so that you've got that uptime that you're looking for. So when we think about that cost, that middle bullet is the one I really want to talk about, the reduced voice cost and conferencing costs. For a lot of customers, that's true. There is a reduced cost. Depending on what you're paying for voice services today and what voice services we're eliminating, right? Going from, say, WebEx to Skype for Business, a lot of times we do see a lot of cost savings for customers in the way it's licensed and the costs for the service. Whereas for some customers, maybe you've got a really sweetheart deal with your SIP trunk provider and you're getting really, really low rates. And when you look at the Microsoft licensing costs, which we'll get into in a second, what you're doing on-prem is cheaper, in which case maybe a hybridized deployment is better for you, right? So it's not a one-size-fits-all, but it is flexible enough that with a little bit of analysis, we can work with you and figure out what's the right deployment methodology for you, whether it's full cloud or hybridized. So when we think about that PSTN calling, it looks just like it does for Skype for Business on-premise. Really, from a user perspective, they don't notice much difference. Some of the features that aren't there yet in the cloud, you can't do hunt groups in the cloud. You can't do an advanced IVR in the cloud, right? What you can do on-prem is still a little more. All of that's in the roadmap for the cloud, but it's not out today. So there are still a few features and functions that may push you to be hybridized, depending on if you really use those features or functions or not. So when we think about those different suites, right? This is a good slide for a lot of people to kind of take away when you think about, which features and functions are you looking for? Are you looking for meeting broadcast? Well, that's included in the E3, and if that's all you're looking for, well, then that's all you need. Whereas if you're looking for, the predictive e-discovery or the cloud PBX or PSTN conferencing, that's all cloud-based. Or E5 based, I should say. So that's where you start looking at the E5 SKU. When we think about typically within Microsoft, if you're going to use any one of these, you can buy them all a la carte. Generally, we say if you're going to use two of the features of a particular suite, you're probably better off buying the suite. It's going to be cheaper. Note that with the E5 SKU, while you get the conferencing piece, if you want the PSTN calling, there is also a voice plan that has to be purchased with it. Now, the price indicated here, you might not be able to read it in the fine print, the $24 one is for international and domestic calling. If you want domestic only, you're a U.S.-based only company and this person doesn't need to call internationally, that's $12. Per month per user for the calling plan, and that gets you your bucket of minutes, and that gets you, it's all pooled per users, just like you would have with your on-prem deployment. So again, specifically for Skype for Business, when we think about that cloud PBX, right? When we think about those features and functions, where do you want PSTN calling versus where cloud PBX comes in? Understanding those different features and functions, right, where it's just PSTN calling, I'm just doing conference calls, versus where I actually want this to be my phone system in the cloud. So what are the next steps? How do you, these are the big changes in E5. And for a lot of you, if you're already an Office 365 customer, it may be as simple as getting your hands on and playing with some of the stuff to figure out if it's right for you and exposing your users to this. So a customer immersion experience is something that we do at New Signature with our friends over at Microsoft to help you get a hands-on experience for your business users so that they can give us feedback on what's going to be useful. Does this seem like a good idea? Or what should we do first? Maybe we know it's a good idea and we have 3 different things we want to do, but we want to know which order. What's the highest priority? So we really get that first-hand knowledge from the business users on what's going on and what's going to help them so that we're not just guessing from an ivory tower as to what will help. We can do these at Microsoft offices. We can do them as more of a demo, or we can do them hands-on, right? We like to bring kits on site. I'm going on site to a large corporation just after the Thanksgiving holiday where I'm taking over a conference room for 2 days, setting up the equipment in a conference room, and then we're doing 2 sessions, 3 hours each, for their business users to come in and kind of touch this stuff and see it so that they can give us feedback of, would this be useful? Does this seem good? So that's really a great way for you as an IT organization or you as a business user to get that information. So this is really a key step that we like to do to get that information out. One of the other ones is to look at, if you haven't made your purchase yet or if you've recently made your purchase, looking at the fast track experience to help you with it. Microsoft works with us on this so that we can use these services, dollars available to you for different planning. The one thing I guess I would say is the Exchange workload is excluded from this now. There is a blog, fasttrack.office.com, which will walk you through all of the different features and functions that are coming out from Office 365 so that you can keep on board. There are other programs and services available from within Microsoft, but they change all the time. So what I suggest is you work with your local solution architect and sales team, and they'll happily help you walk through what different programs are available within Microsoft to get you some help to figure out where to get started, because that's what I see with a lot of customers. They struggle with, this all sounds wonderful. What's the first thing I have to do? I'm already in Office 365 and I want to use some of these things. What should I do? Or I'm not yet in Office 365 and I want to get there, but where do I start? It's overwhelming. And that's really where we focus on at the beginning is what's the order of operations and how do you get started? So with that, I'd like to go check the Q&A panel. Please use the Q&A if you have any questions about the stuff we presented here today, and I'll happily tackle those questions. A lot of the common ones we get while we're waiting to see what people put in are, what is the first project? And if you're not already in Office 365, it's identity management, right? Identity management is the be-all, end-all, the first project that we need to have squared up before really we do anything else, because we have to have that security piece. In order to be as mobile as we want to be, we have to have people be able to log in securely. Doing things like conditional access. If you are a heavily regulated industry, I've done this with some in the financial area. You cannot access SharePoint unless you're on-premise. Yes, it's a global service, but we've got some really sensitive data in there. We don't want you accessing SharePoint unless you are on our network. All the other services, feel free to use when you're remote, but that one maybe we don't want you to access, or maybe just this particular site or just for this particular content. Doing things like machine learning, understanding that, hey, you log in from New York every day at 9 a.m., and all of a sudden you logged in from Boston today. That's unusual. We don't see you do that. Let me issue you an extra challenge. Let me issue you a multi-factor challenge just to make sure you're you, which I normally don't do from this machine because it's trusted or you're on the network. Doing things like, I'm not going to force multi-factor authentication when you're on the network. But as soon as you're off our network, I'm going to enforce multi-factor authentication so that we're secure and locked down. And getting all that out of the way so that we're comfortable with the security level, and then once we're comfortable with that, then we start deploying the services out to people. Most people start with Exchange and then move on from there. The other big question we get a lot is around I'm not ready to go all in, or, it's more of a statement, I'm not ready to go all in, I'm not ready to turn over the keys of everything. Nobody can. You can't turn everything over in a weekend, right? If you're at 0, you're not going to get to 100 in 2 seconds. It's not going to happen. We have to pick and choose. It's going to be a slow process. Most of our customers, it's anywhere from a 6-month to a 6-year process, depending on how big, how complicated their environment is and what their end goal is. Is their end goal 100% cloud, no servers left on-prem? Or is their goal hybridized? We want to move these specific workloads to the cloud, but we want to keep these things on-premise for these reasons, right? So once we know what your end state goal is, then we can help you map out what that roadmap is. But it is a longer process. So it's one of those where you need to do adequate planning up front, and then you can move through. But it's definitely not something where users can consume that much change that quick, depending on what we're changing for them, right? If it's Exchange or Skype for Business, well, those services don't really change. When we migrate those to the cloud, users don't really notice. There's no perceptible difference from using it on-prem to using it in the cloud, whereas the new features, Planner, Office 365 Groups, the real-time click protection, the when are we challenging them from a security standpoint, the Skype for Meeting Broadcast, those new features we're adding are the ones that take time to adopt. And that's where we see people struggle. Okay. Not seeing anything in Q&A. So with that, I will thank you all for your time. We will send out the recording and the deck will be made available if you want it. So feel free. I'm going to hang around for a few minutes. Feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A window at the bottom of the screen. But other than that, we look forward to working with you. And again, next steps, CIE, looking at hands-on for your users, and then talking with us about what funding or what services might be available from Microsoft to help you get going.
Thank you, everyone, for your time. Again, if you have any other questions that come up post the event, please feel free to email those to info@newsignature.com as well, and we are happy to get that to the right person to answer the question. Thank you.